how to feel. I know that you're still hurting too. No, I'm not broken. I'm just scared to belong here, scared to be happier. I'm not broken, I'm not broken. I'm just a little depressed. I'm not broken. Someone says here, if astrology isn't real, how come my astronomy lover BF always lines up his behavior with Saturn girls' predictions? Because no one's even fucking here, yo. So whatever. If any, I'm gonna start talking about Mars conjunct Saturn in just a minute. And then if people come, then they can put their information in the chat, you know, and then we can chat about that. If astrology isn't real, how come my astronomy lover BF always lines up his behavior with Saturn girls' predictions? Well, because I'm the fucking shit. That's why. That's why. Because I'm just good. That's why. Thank you, my love. She's so sweet. Her name is Spicy Autistic Girlfriend. Hi, Shaima. How are you, sweetheart? How are you? Happy Eclipse Day. Hooray, hooray. It's Eclipse Day. It's like Rex Manning Day. But none of you remember that movie. You know, Empire Records. That was such a 90s thing. You guys wouldn't know about that. Anyway, Shaima, it's great to see you. It's great to see you. Hello, Ms. Colston. Ms. Colston, happy solar eclipse day. Oh, of course. You are always first on deck. And then a little bit later, I'll talk a little bit about Mars conjunct Saturn. I had those eclipse glasses. I got them off Amazon. And I was going to look at the eclipse, but I'm like, why? I don't need to. I don't need to. Like, I have the glasses, but I didn't trust them, to be honest. I went outside. I used them. I looked for a second. I really couldn't see shit. I'm like, I'm good. This is wonderful. I'm great. I can see everyone else's pictures after. Ms. Colston. Ms. Colston. And plus, as an astrologer, I'm way more concerned with, what we see coming out of the eclipse. We tend to say the effects of the eclipse, but the eclipse didn't cause anything unless you stared at it and got your retinas burned out. It's not causing the effects that we see come up after, but it announces them. Yes, it announces them. So I'm writing down Ms. Colston first. Ms. Colston first. We've got December. Oh, that's right. Sagittarius. I love Sagittarius. I love my Sag brothers and sisters and siblings. My siblings. I love my Sages. Okay, what time was that? 6 p.m. 6 p.m. Nolans. 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 Nolans, LA. LA. Okay, let me quickly put down. I'll write down Tiffany while we're doing this. Tiffany. Tiffany. So I said, what about breakfast at Tiffany's? We both kind of liked it. Something, something. See, when I think of breakfast at Tiffany's, it makes me think I just had sex with someone named Tiffany and we're having breakfast, the next day. That's the first thing I think of. So let's put Tiffany in there. And Tiffany, you just said in Texas, honey. Oh, San Antonio, yes. San Antonio, Texas. Okay, San Antonio, Texas. Okay, now we got you in there. And let's put um Christine. Wait, hold on, who's next? You see, I need help with this shit because I'm fucking ADHD, yo. And I lose track of shit. And I start talking about other shit. You feel me? Angela Peck. Angela Peck. Let's see here. 10, 1, 93. 1541. Yes. In Bethesda, Maryland. Oh, I remember you. Bethesda. I just remember Bethesda because that's where the military hospital is. That's where the military hospital is. Yes. Oh, hello, spicy autistic girlfriend is here. And thank you for giving me a shout out. Thank you, thank you. Shaima, I got you, my darling. Oh, my darling. Oh, my darling. Oh, my darling Shaima. Something, something. Okay. 12, 15. I just figure if I put this shit in here now, like, I'm not gonna lose fucking track of it later. Because otherwise, like, I ain't got fucking Amber helping me. My daddy's not here with me. And my little brother Rory isn't on. And typically they help me with shit staying on task. So I'm doing my best here. I'm doing my best. Providence, Rhode Island. Yeah, so full of Providence. You know. I went to Providence, Rhode Island, and it, you know, you know. But your kids played outside, so it was good. Yeah, I mean, that probably helps if you can't see the eclipse and then, your kids play outside. Shima. So let's see. 09, 28, 2007. Tripoli, Libya. Tripoli. There's that old, like, the United States Marine song. I know we shouldn't necessarily support that, but from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. Right? Tripoli. Tripoli, Libya. We got Libya. Valentina, thank you for coming. And now I'm going to put spicy autistic GF in there. Girlfriend. Spicy. Spicy autistic GF. And I got you. And then I'm going to start reading this shit because otherwise I'm going to get so bogged down in people's fucking nonsense. Oh, Spicy, you're a cappy. You're a cappy mommy. Look at you, Spicy, a cappy mommy. 12:41 p.m. Atlanta. The lost city of Atlanta. That never gets old to me, but people are like, oh, yeah, that was funny the first time. Be scared by your story and embarrassed of anyone looking at it? Well, take it easy. You're among homies and such, Like, I'm never going to do anything unethical. Well, not when it comes to astrology, at least. Not when it comes to astrology. And then I left what? Christina, I'm sorry. And then I left what? First time here. And anyway, you could tell me in a little bit. But first we have Ms. Colston. We have Ms. Colston, who just had the eclipse today in her 10th house. And and I know I've talked about this before, but I can't say this enough. Right? This is a very, very exciting time. Empress Adele, mother of John. Hola to you as well, Empress Adele. So, it's crazy because it's true. Picked up by my friends right on your videos. And I was definitely right. Couldn't believe it. That's wonderful. Spicy Autistic said, it's crazy because it's true. And I picked up my boyfriend's rising based on your videos. And I was definitely right because it's still on point. Crazy. I wouldn't believe me if I were other people either. I mean, People who get 420, please if you can. I mean, we all like 420 for one reason, but then, there's the people who like it because it's Hitler's birthday, which we're not fond of those people. And we don't need to pay attention to those people, you know. But that is the thing. So back to Ms. Colston. And I'm going to put 5 minutes on the clock. We're going to put 5 minutes on the clock and start talking. And Ms. Colston is like my first member of my channel's membership stuff. So like they always get priority, or she always gets priority, So that's what it's gotta be. Thank you, Ms. Colston, for being my first and only member so far. And I want to start a book club soon because we need to be reading, philosophical, spiritual, esoteric, and astrological books together for people who want to participate. So I'm going to figure out how to do that next. So you see, this is a really exciting time in Ms. Colston's life because when we have these eclipses oscillating between our 10th and 4th house, right? Because she's a Cancer rising, you see? My daughter's a Capricorn rising, so the opposite sort of thing. And that means the October eclipse is going to be in her 4th house, you see? Now, this eclipse is what we call a North Node eclipse. And yes, it was conjunct Chiron. And I saw a lot of internet astrologers making a big deal about that. And I still play with Chiron, but I do way more traditional stuff. So I didn't necessarily make a big deal out of that. But what is a big deal to me is that Mercury retrograde was conjoining this eclipse or conjunct this eclipse, right? So I imagine, even though this is a North Node eclipse in Aries, and it's very forward propelled, right? With the North Node eclipse, it increases the significations. There's a sense of almost excitement, anxiety, or danger around these sorts of eclipses, you see? But when Mercury retrograde's involved, it's bringing in messages from the past. It's bringing in big endings that happened in the past back to the beginning. So we could see over the next few months, we could see people that we totally cut off or that we did not imagine to ever speak to or see again, right? Coming back into our lives, sort of like a new chapter. Yeah. I mean, I've already seen some interesting Mercury retrograde stuff myself, and I'd be interested to hear from you, Ms. Colston, if you have too. But anyway, so when we see these 10th house eclipses like we see with you, Ms. Colston, right? We're expecting to see big changes in your life direction, right? And perhaps even in your career. And that's often, hi, Daddy. Hi, Daddy. Just really quick, I'm going to stop the clock really quick because I just have to show off my... Oh, I stopped it at 2:22. So, good luck for you, Ms. Colston. So, I have a caller from my daddy, and it's so exciting. I'm so excited. My bruises can't hide it. I know. I want you, Daddy. So, yes, I'm very excited because, I have a caller now. So it's like official, you feel me? Okay, I'm going to press resume, but I love you, Daddy. And thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. Thank you for me coming. I mean, gosh, Because I came here to show up, to do this, for all you. But we see oftentimes big changes in life direction with these 10th house eclipses. Oftentimes big changes in our career, you see. So, I always mention my own example, but I quit a job of 20 years to do this. And it is a big gamble. Chris Brennan, right? One of my favorite astrologers, he said, eclipses bring some of the best and worst events of our lives. And sometimes they are the same thing. Right? An event can be extraordinary and yet traumatic and challenging at the same fucking time. Thank you, Christina, for the congratulations. So yes, it's very exciting for me. Because for many years, I thought I was a dominant and thought I was a top. And then I met my daddy and I realized my true place. I mean, where I feel most natural, really. Just you know, completely natural. Doesn't mean I still don't like to, be a toppy here and there. But anyway, so this is a very exciting time for you, right? And these things, I think of the 10th and 4th house axis here with the eclipses as having to do with manifesting shit, making shit real, right? We're about to be out of time in just a little bit for you, but I just wanted to reiterate that we could, you see, with these big new beginnings, there can be a significant feeling of grief and death that accompanies it, right? Like, for example, leaving a job of 20 years in my case. Like, I'd known a lot of the people there for 20 fucking years. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, wow, it's a big death in a way and a big grief. And we do see these sorts of things kind of implied with eclipses because it's a super big, right? It's like a supercharged new moon, supercharged new beginning. But the thing about new beginnings is they are also what? Endings. They're bringing things to a close. You see? So the clock is running out, but I do want to mention just a few more things, Ms. Colston, because you're so sweet, you're so wonderful, and you're so supportive of me, and I really appreciate that. So, and I may have mentioned this last time to you, sweetheart. But Venus is about to enter your 10th house too. And then followed by Mars, right? So this is about, wait, Venus is already in your 10th house. It just happened the other day. It was on the 3rd or the 4th. But what's wonderful about Venus going through our 10th house is that if you are in a steady job or career, you could see like a female boss or authority figure or someone who gives you sort of a leg up, right? When Venus goes through our 10th house, I think of polish your resume, girl. Now Venus isn't happy in Aries. We know that. But Venus in your 10th house is very potent and it's very nice, right? It's where we feel like we get positive recognition. It's where opportunities first emerge. And I always say, time to polish up your resume. So very good. But see, then Mars entering in there might be opportune. Because then Mars makes us freak out at our jobs. We get in fights with bosses. We get resistant to authority figures. I'm my own, like, I'm self-employed. So typically what we see with me is like increased exhibitionism, increased showing my skin to everybody. So we do see that kind of stuff too. But quite frequently, it's more conflicts with authority figures. Ms. Colson says, my mom's 7th year anniversary was on the 1st. And aunt was on the 3rd. Congratulations. Very cool. Oh, 7th year anniversary of passing away, I guess. I thought you meant wedding anniversary first. I'm sorry, darling. I didn't understand. Empress Adele says little death. Yes, le petit mort, right? The orgasm, the little death, right? Because we do surrender during orgasm, don't we? We do sort of surrender our sense of individuality in that moment of ecstasy. I mean, I'm addicted to the little death, if you know what I mean. I love it. I need as many little, St. Paul in the gospel said, I die daily. I need to die like 3 or 4 times daily, to be honest with you. You know what I'm saying? So, I love you, Ms. Colston. Let's go on to Tiffany. Oops. If I could tell you how to feel, I know that you're still hurting too. Venus in Pisces. Yes, I love Venus in Pisces. They love it too when I ruin their makeup and their hair and call them all sorts of filthy names. Like, well, I can't say it here, but you know what I mean. The same names I like to be called quite often. Well, some of them at least. If I could tell you how to feel. Okay, let's start the 5 minutes for Tiffany. And she just had the eclipse in her 12th house, right? You have Mars conjunct Venus too. A very unhappy Venus with a very happy Mars. When I see Venus conjunct Mars in a woman's chart or someone who was born female, right? Assigned female at birth, we tend to see people who present more of a masculine, forceful, dominant, extroverted, you know, someone who comes off as a bit more masculine to other people. And it's such a weird thing to say, more masculine, because everyone has their own way of expressing their gender and all that sort of thing. You're welcome, Miss Colston. You're always welcome. Passed away and her sister's heavenly birthday. Oh, I'm so sorry, darling. But yes, it's pretty wild, you know. And that was when Venus went into Aries. You know, you're having your Venus return, Tiffany, and Venus went into your 12th house. When I think of Venus going into the 12th house, I think of, hey, it's time to like have some self-care, you know. I always make this stupid joke, like, we're declaring a war on stress. You know, it's time to drop bath bombs. You know? So, you know, do that. It's time to take care of yourself. Sometimes we actually meet a therapist or get into therapy as Venus transits the 12th house, or we have a really good therapy session. I love my therapist. But again, going back to the Mars-Venus thing, you see, it can be people that are perceived as sort of, you know, more direct, more forceful, that sort of stuff. For people who are born, you know, or assigned male at birth, it tends to make, you know, more feminine men, right? More like, in the 90s, we used to say like metrosexual and shit like that, you know? But people tend to take care of themselves, but they still can be, there's very good people with that, and just like every other placement, very not good people with that. So just very interesting to notice the dynamic. Now with the eclipses oscillating between your 12th and 6th houses, this is just like my partner, you know, but the opposite, they're Scorpio rising. So you see, this is like the cocoon phase of our lives, when we're sort of like gestating or changing. We're assimilating all these big changes. Everything's bubbling up into the surface to come out next year, right? As sort of hope and optimism. You know, it's like emerging into the light of day, sort of. Now, it's not always a positive thing for most people, or for all people, rather. But it can be. It very much can be. And so for you right now, as you anticipate that period, this is sort of like having to assimilate and process and understand the shit that you've gone through. Sometimes we have big mental health challenges, right? And that's what this looks like for you, having to face either mental health challenges, an addiction, you know, isolation, institution stuff, like being in prison, or, you know, the foster care systems, you know. I'm not saying that you necessarily ever were in that, but we see these types of things coming back up to the surface. And remember, this is a Mercury retrograde eclipse. So we're going to have messages coming back from the past, from things that we thought were dead and buried and gone, you know. So it's interesting, as again, because this is a very active Aries North Node eclipse, and yet there's still a sense of grief, right? And that might be a little contribution too from Chiron, or an indication rather, that still with this sort of thing is a sense of grief and loss coming back up from the past and having to address these things. So, but still, this is very, very important in this whole eclipse cycle for you and your development, because this is where we sort of, we process and come to terms with things that just happened. You know, things will happen to us, traumatic events, and we don't even get a moment to think about it or to reflect on it, and more importantly, process it. And the way we process things, in my experience, is by allowing ourselves to feel them, allowing ourselves to fall to pieces sometimes, allowing ourselves to express emotion and experience the emotion ourselves, right? And there has to be a bit of reflection, you know, an understanding, sometimes intellectualizing, right? Oops, let me turn that off. In order to sift through things, right? But the most important part is allowing ourselves to feel, you know, and emote. So we ran out the 5 minutes on the clock, and we mentioned Venus really quick, and that's wonderful. But also at the end of May, next month, you're going to have Jupiter going to your first house. You know, just watch too much snacking, of course. You know, that's sort of a stereotype. But on the other side of that, on the other hand, this is also a very optimistic time. This is a time when we start coming out of our shell once again. You know, we start gaining confidence once again. And your North Node is in the first house. So this is important for you because sort of the motif of your life now, especially at this point, is about learning to be a strong, independent person. Now, you may have had like this aseptic hyper independence when you were younger, but this is more about confidence because hyper independence isn't about confidence. It's about fear, right? It's about being afraid to let people in or to let people help or, you know, to take a risk on trusting people. Has a difficult time trusting people. Whereas North Node in the first house is learning to have the confidence to allow and to trust people because you got it. You got yourself. You got your own back, you know. And that allows you the space to trust other people. So anyway, it's just an interesting thing. Interesting thing here. So I would be excited for you for the end of May. And that's sort of like stuff that's issuing off this whole eclipse thing. And it might make you feel like there's sort of a loss of identity or, you know, we're experiencing this sort of liminal space between, you know, losing ourselves and finding ourselves, if that makes any sense. And you might experience towards the end of May as Jupiter tours your first house, which will be a whole year, that you start feeling this sense of yourself again, this sense of feeling like yourself, of, you know, identity, you see? And hopefully you feel proud of it and a sense of confidence around it because that's what Jupiter often bequeaths, you know? Oh, I'm so sorry. It's going into your second house. So you've been already that's so fucked up of me. Oh my God. Jupiter's going to Gemini and I was looking at Taurus. It's going into your second house, which is even better. So hopefully you've been gaining that sort of, you know, feeling of yourself, the belief in yourself, right? Because this would have followed the first and seventh house eclipses you would have had in 2022. You see? And then Jupiter went into Taurus May of 2023. So you see how these things came out of each other, right? There's a shakeup in identity that happens in 2022. And then Jupiter comes in and hopefully puts you back together and helps you, you know, helps you feel a bit more whole again. We're never really whole, although I'm full of holes, you know. How many holes can we fill in this cheese? You know. But the sense of wholeness, at least relative wholeness from where we came from. Because we're all in a process of defragmentation, right? Just like your hard drive. Although they don't do that shit anymore with solid state drives. It's a whole nother thing. Let me write down before I forget. I fancy life. I don't fancy life. I'm dyslexic. I don't know what the fuck those letters say. Fancy life. 12, 9, 84. Born around me. Santiago, Chile. Santiago, Chile. Been a lot of big stuff going on in Chile. Do you have your birth time, fancy life? I really don't like not playing without a birth time. I really want a birth time, fancy life. I really want a birth time, please. I really want a birth time. 2 in the pink and 1 in the... Yeah. I always say, Adele, that people are a lot like bowling balls, you know? This is me, and this is someone's daughter, you know? Or non-binary person, or whoever. Because you know... 1453. 1453. Okay, when we get to you, we'll get to you. Okay. So, wonderful Tiffany. Now we're going to go ahead to Shaima quick. I'm so sorry because Shaima tipped me. She gave me just the tip, you know, just to see how it felt. You know, just a little bit of the tip. You know, still feels good. Okay. Just a little bit of the tip. You see? Fancy life, you're welcome. Look at that, Shaima. This is your child. I think you said your son. And your son has the sun. Your child was born at dawn as the sun was coming up over the horizon. You see that? The sun was rising in the east. Wonderful. Leah, I'll write your shit down real quick. Leah, 4, and then I'll start the timer. Leah, 4:15. It's almost your birthday, baby. It was just my brother's birthday. 4:15:95. 12:36 a.m. Omaha? What the hell is Omaha? I'm sorry, I'm being a bitch. I'm just joking. Omaha. I know, I'm stupid. Omaha. Omaha, Nebraska. Anyway, Shaima, the first thing that I noticed is the sun rising up over the... Valentina had a birth time listed above. Leah too. Oh, Valentina. Holy shit, I'll try to get to everyone. Valentina. Yeah, my brother and my boyfriend are both Aries. My boyfriend is also Aries. Valentina. Valentina. 1:16. Why is this fucking pen not working, yo? Shit's driving me nuts. I had all kinds of fucking pens in here. Where'd they all go? Okay. Omaha. Valentina. Valentina Ballerina. Holy fuck, none of these pens are fucking working properly. Like, what do I have to do? Sorry for cussing so much. And remember, date time city. Date time city. Because I'm neurodivergent. And I get thrown for a loop if it's not date time city. Valentina. Miami, Florida. Welcome to Miami. Bienvenidos a Miami. Okay, now I'll start the clock for Shaima. So this is very optimistic. When the sun is rising over the horizon as you were born, and the sun in the first house. People with the sun in the first house are very important people, even when they're Libras, because technically the sun falls in Libra, which is interesting because that's the fall, isn't it? Sun in the first house, people. You know, shoot, my mom has sun in the first house, and she thinks she's very, very important. Believe me. Sarah Palin, if any of you remember her, sun in the first house. I think George W. Bush has sun in the first house. No, he has sun in the 12th house. But anyway, you see, there's a running theme. There are people who definitely feel like they're the center of their own system. I mean, we all do to a certain extent, you know, but sometimes there's sort of an undue confidence. Or dare I say arrogance. They just assume that they're good at everything. They assume that they know everything, oftentimes. And sometimes they get put in their place, and sometimes they don't accept being put in their place. You see? Which is interesting. You know, this young man was born just after a full moon. You know, what was that, like a day or so after? So we can call it a disseminating moon, but there's interesting, you know, it's interesting because it's still really close to a full moon. And these people often have shit to prove, you know. I mean, he might be very competitive, to be honest. Where's Mars? Mars is in Gemini. So, you know, we like to run our mouths, talk shit, all that sort of thing. But Moon in Aries also does that too. Like, they want it now. I want it now! 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 You know, and they just start talking over you. Like, I don't know if you guys remember that kid that went viral on TikTok. Like, look, listen, Linda, shh, listen, Linda. You know, like I think of that kind of shit. Or even like Veruca Salt from Willy Wonka, you know. I like the one from the 70s, you know. I want an Oompa Loompa now, Daddy. You know, I mean, that's kind of how I am. But, although I'm a bit more obedient, I'd like to think. But the moon in the seventh house also, it can be a bit of a simp. It can be people who are people pleasers. It can be people who are looking for their value through other people. People who really value helping other people. You know, often these people can be assistants, you know, or work in sort of a service or subservient sort of role to someone else, you know. So anyway, now the way the eclipse is going to affect this child, you see, the eclipse was conjunct their moon, or his moon, or whatever. You see? So this is affecting the emotional nature. Number one, there's going to, I mean, 2007, how old? Let me do the calculator really quick. Let me see the calculator. So, you know, 16 or 17 years old. I am 16 going on 17. I mean, that fucking shit was just so creepy. Like, that's creepy. You know, anyway, I won't go into that. That was from Sound of Music, which is one of my favorite movies. Edelweiss, Edelweiss, every morning. Sorry, I won't sit there and torch you guys with Edelweiss, but, you know, I love that song. But with the eclipse conjunct the moon here, and Mercury retrograde, like almost exactly conjunct the moon, right? There's a sense of bringing up emotional trauma from childhood, perhaps. Now, this child is still very, very young, you know, competitive and likes to be the center of attention. Yeah, exactly as I said, you know. Thank you, Daddy, for writing Valentina stuff for me, Daddy. But anyway, and your child has a Venus in Leo. So they're going to be a bit possessive and show-offy too. Like, yo, look at me. And they're going to be a bit popular. Like, other kids are going to like them. You know, the first house ruler in the 11th house, right? Venus in Leo is like, you know, big man on campus, right? Captain of the football team. That's the boy that's having sex with the prom queen, you know, typically that kind of thing. But this eclipse is going to be difficult. You know, it's going to bring up stuff from the past and probably insecurities. And I bet under the surface with that 7th house moon, there's a good amount of insecurity. Okay, that was the timer, but Shaima, I'm going to give you a couple more minutes because this is important. Because your child has Mars opposite Pluto. So there is a violent streak, or there is a tendency to want to fight, perhaps. And they may feel like they have to defend themselves. Maybe they feel like life is always fighting them. So they have to put on armor and nails, right? And bring weapons just to go to the grocery store, just to do simple things. They might always seem like they're itching for a fight, you know? So just be aware of that. And when it comes to romantic partners, they're going to want someone who can match their intelligence, right? They want people who can be deep with them. And I bet that your child has an antagonistic relationship to religion. They might not like religion. They might feel controlled by religion. Or they could be fanatical also. But typically we see people who had a negative experience of religion growing up. We also see people get into conspiracy theories and shit and like aliens and nonsense with all that. You know. Now, your child is also going to feel quite isolated with this 12th house Saturn. There's always going to be a sense, even though they're popular, that they're never really a part of the whole thing. You know, and I imagine dad was never in the picture. Either dad's an alcoholic, or dad's not around, or dad had some mental illness, or something like that. So. Let me screenshot this other person in case we get to them. Just remember, like, if you're requesting stuff, I need date, time, city. Date, time, city. So we always need times. So thank you, Savannah, for providing that. We got to go on to the next person because we just ran out of time. But thank you, Shaima. I hope that's good. just before we go, these eclipses are oscillating between your sun's first and seventh houses. So you're going to see traumatic relationship shit. They may have a big breakup with, a girlfriend or whatever. I know when I was in high school, every time I got a crush on someone, it was like a mental breakdown for me. It's like a big fucking mental breakdown because, Cancer Venus, along with Gemini Mars, it's like, we really, really, really want to fuck, but we really, really, really want love and all that shit too, So just be aware they could have a traumatic relationship experience, but then that would feed into this October eclipse, right? As we approach Halloween, which is going to be in his first house, and it's going to be a whole shakeup of his identity, which might be precipitated by this big ending or big beginning of a relationship. You see, dad is not around, exactly, you see. And, I know for me, getting into this new relationship I'm into also represented a big shift in my own identity. It did, I'm in the process of being changed by it. You see, so these things do precipitate those big shakeups in our identity. Because relationships are like psychological collisions, aren't they? We crash into each other. And we push all sorts of buttons in each other that we never even knew were there. Yes? And we're changed by it. Because we get a new experience of ourselves from the experience of the partnership. Yes? So anyway, Shaima, I hope that was useful for you. And we're going to move on now. Shaima. Now we're going back to Angela. Angela Peck. He had a breakup with girlfriend. Yeah, so there you go. And this is going to feed into him now contemplating, like, what does that all mean? What is this? What does this all mean? Wait, hold on. What the fuck, yo? There we go. Okay. Sorry for cussing so much. It's just, it is what it is. So Angela, this is another one of these fun charts because I do whole sign houses. And people freak out, especially when they have a 29 degrees ascendant, right? Because in Placidus, it'll start your fucking first house there. Whereas I, because I practice mostly ancient astrology, will start your whole first house with the beginning of the fucking sign, Capricorn. You see? And that shifts everything around. And when I see a second house Saturn, I'll go ahead and start the clock. When I see a second house Saturn, I think of someone who grew up with a sense of lack. Like often we have people who grew up poor or at least feeling like they are, or their parents keep saying things like, there's not enough. Like, no, there's not enough to go around. No, we can't do that right now. So there's a sense of having to wear your socks till they're unwearable or whatever, you see. You're welcome, Shaima. You're welcome, welcome, welcome. You are so welcome, my love. Anyway, but you see what I'm saying? There's oftentimes a sense of having to work hard for things. There's a sense of frugality, But the gift of that whole thing is that you often appreciate what you have a lot more as you get older, right? Shaima, the thing I forgot to say about your sun is Pluto is trine the moon. So your sun still has this deep intensity side. Like when they fall in love, they're going to get very sort of attached and maybe obsessive and maybe controlling. And they may be into like, kink and stuff like that. But we won't go into that. What's important for Angela, though, is this eclipse is in, right? Because she's a Capricorn rising. And Capricorn and Cancer risings are having the eclipses on their 10th and 4th house axis, which I've already talked about how important it is. And oftentimes when we see this 4th house eclipse, and it's exactly conjunct her moon, your moon, sweetheart, oftentimes we do see a big move. Now, the moon rules your 7th house. So this could revolve around a partner, the beginning of a relationship kind of thing. Moving in with someone, that could be another thing that you see. It could also be something to do with your mother, There could be a big complication or some sort of new beginning for her, But I would just be aware of that, you see. Because it's like, it's 19 degrees and 19 degrees. It's pretty wild, But we also see big moves. People literally like either buy a new house, find a new apartment, change states, change countries, all sorts of stuff like that. But it also could be big changes with your parents or your history, your origins, where you come from. Sometimes we like, oh my gosh, I was adopted, or oh my gosh, like I'm related to Hitler or some shit, I don't know. There's that NPR show or PBS show, right, where they like go through your genealogy, and they find out, I don't know, like, your great 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 granddaddy owned slaves or some shit. And some of the people get really freaked out, I try to remember some of the funny ones, but I won't go into it. But I think a lot of you know what I'm talking about. So having something reemerge about your origins, like finding out more about who you really are, that can be sort of a thing. You see? You had your Saturn return 2022 starting in 2020, very beginning of 2021, very end of 2022, going through your second house. So you've come through your Saturn return recently, sweetheart. Good for you. And now Saturn's going through your third house, which oftentimes makes us feel like we can't express ourselves. We feel mealy-mouthed, or our siblings have difficulties. I'm concerned about this because Saturn's going into my third house next in 2026. Amber, you did not have to come. I thought you were supposed to be at work. My darling. Anyway. So this eclipse is very special for you because this year is about making shit happen. It's about manifesting things, as I said earlier. Right? This is where we do stuff. Whereas the next phase will be about reflecting on stuff. And it's funny, Amber just showed up because she also has a Virgo Venus like you do. Right? And Venus isn't very happy in Virgo. And I always make this joke, because they're so subby. It's like, Venus falls in Virgo. Yeah, on their knees. I know I tell that joke all the time, but it never gets old to me. So relax. Relax. Relax, relax. What was I missing here? Oh, the 9th house ruler. 10th house ruler in the 9th house, rather. So now Venus isn't happy, so I imagine there's been difficulty around your career. However, you might find a certain amount of success or recognition in legal affairs, academia, or like university jobs, stuff to do with spirituality, religion, astrology. And with Chiron in the 9th house, I imagine you had a difficult experience of religion growing up, So, and oftentimes that leads us into these more mystical paths and such. And I imagine you're a real big pain in the ass with a Scorpio Mars conjunct a Scorpio Mercury. It can be a very aggressive type mind. People who are sort of argumentative. People who are fanatical about what they believe and such. But it can also be very quick. It can also be very paranoid. Think everyone else is thinking about them when no one else gives a fuck. Unparalleled bliss, we'll see if we get to you. Let's see. We'll see if we get to you. We got people on deck. Deck. I said deck. On deck. Like baseball, Anyway. So it's all interesting stuff, you see. I mentioned Saturn. Jupiter is about to go into your 6th house after being in your 5th house, which is, I hope you enjoyed that, because typically it's supposed to be pretty fun and enjoyable. And you might be like kicking yourself like, oh, wasn't that fun? But I think if you think back, either you had something with children, maybe you had a child, maybe your children had some luck, Thank you, Amber. I saw you texting me with birth dates and times. I have a bunch of people first to get to, and yes, we will get to them too. Anyway, first house ruler in the second house. What was I talking about? Oh, Jupiter going into your sixth house. So I hope you had fun over the past year or so, because at the end of May, Jupiter's going to go into your sixth house. Hi, Christina. Hello. Jupiter's going to go into your sixth house, which is about bringing order and organization and structure to your life, right? It's about doing the stuff, taking responsibility, doing shit that you hadn't done, right? It's a good phase. You see, it's also when we can get our health in order. And I'm just going to say the same shit I always do, because I preach this all the time, that we need enough sleep, we need enough nutrition, and we need some exercise, right? Even walking for 20 minutes a day, 3 to 4 days a week, you know, that can change our lives dramatically in terms of our, you know, our health and feeling great, you know, feeling good, feeling tolerable even, you know, if you can, like if you're able to walk, some people can't, but finding some sort of physical outlet, you know, very important, especially for, you know, Mars conjunct Mercury, you know. And it's interesting because you were born just after a full moon too, so you have that same like shit to prove, you know. And you may have a good sense of confidence or whatever with Sun in the 10th house. But you see, there's still a wound around all that stuff too. And the 10th house, right, ruler isn't very happy. So things are a little bit slower coming to fruition. We'll move on in just a second. But use the 6th house, Jupiter stuff to get your life in order. Especially if you've been avoiding things. If you've let things go awry. When Jupiter's in the 5th house, we really sort of just let things go, you know? And then it's like, okay, time to start working on the belly, you know, or whatever, you know. Start doing paperwork that you've been avoiding. No better time than now. So anyway, but let's move on to the next person. That was Angela. And here's Christina. We have an Aries rising. And the eclipse, like, exactly conjunct their north node. Wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful. This is fun for you. You see, in terms of the eclipse cycle, which is sort of like one of my practices in astrology, I start with the 1st and 7th house phase, which is a big shakeup in both relationships and identity. So probably since October of last year, there may have been a big breakup or meeting someone new. But either way, it leads to you having a big shakeup in how you feel yourself. And you get introduced with parts of yourself that you either avoided or didn't know, right? What? All on my opposite. Anyway. Oh, because you're a Libra rising. I see. I see, Amber. Anyway. So this is a very exciting time for you. It's a very exciting eclipse, right? It could just be also a bit traumatic, because when we start having a shakeup in our sense of ourselves, we feel destabilized, right? We feel like things don't necessarily make sense like they did. We feel like, what's going on here? What I wanted to do is now what I don't want to do, and what I didn't want to do is now this. You see, when we get faced with a new idea of ourselves, then we get challenged to let go of a bunch of things that we thought were important before. And that can be quite scary. And we have to find new footing. And when we find the new footing is sort of in the 12th and 6th house phase, which would be next year for you. But this year is all still about Aries and Libra, right? So as we get into October of this year, once again, big shakeup in relationships, probably stemming from this big shakeup in yourself that's happening now, between now and October. And once again, it could be big breakups or meeting someone new, you see? That frequently happens as well. So it's a very exciting time. It really is. It's just not always comfortable. I mean, it rarely is comfortable, to be honest with you. So, so my daddy says, you are so wise. Hmm. Oh, Amber, this is just a sports bra. I was working out before I did this. You know, I did my workout because I want to get rid of my belly for bikini season. I certainly do. You poor thing, Scorpio Venus. Not very happy. Not a very happy Venus. So you've been hurt. You've been hurt by men, probably. You've been hurt by men because you like the bad boys. You like the bad boys, don't you? Or maybe the bad girls. I don't know. The bad boys and the bad girls. Thank you. And Amber, instead of saying donating, let's say tipping. Because I like the tip. You know, I like the tip. It just sounds better than donating. Like donating sounds like, please donate to the Saturn Girl something fund. I don't know. It just sounds like I'm one of Jerry's kids and like I got some, Saturn disability. I mean, I am disabled, but I'm not soliciting funds for it. Anyway, this is a very alluring placement, Venus conjunct Pluto. It's just very difficult because it's your 7th house ruler. So you like guys or whoever that hurts you, and that's not very fun. But the way you approach relationships is pretty creepy too. Because when I see this sort of thing, these are people who also get obsessive and they look at partners or potential partners like prey. It's like you're hunting or stalking your prey. You see? So, and when I see Saturn conjunct Mercury, I think of, neurodivergence. I think of difficulties with school, speech, thinking, processing. Can still be very intelligent. Like Mercury in Sagittarius typically has ADHD. Mercury's not happy in Sagittarius. It's what's called in detriment. And then conjunct Saturn also makes it very difficult because even if it can be quick-witted, like I always make this joke. I think of the people on Jeopardy, and Alex Trebek will be like, this treaty gave power to the nobility and took it away from the monarchy. And someone slams Magna Carta. And Alex Trebek says, oh, I'm sorry, you have to phrase it in the form of a question. It's like, well, fuck, I got the answer, but you didn't say it right. Or you hit the buzzer too many times. You see? But we do see neurodivergence, of course. That is the thing. You got Mars conjunct Jupiter. I have Mars opposite Jupiter. We could be a real pain in the ass because, we're very idealistic. And we assume people should think the way that we do, oftentimes. You got the Sun conjunct Uranus. I have those opposite, Again, no one can tell us shit. No one can tell us what to do. And we'll say, Q, we'll say, fuck you if you try. Christina says they've wrangled in their stalker tendencies. A lot. Okay, good for you. Good for you, sweetheart. You're just a couple years younger than me, so I hope you've learned a few things. And you have your North Node in the 1st house too. So you see, this big eclipse should feel like a new phase in your life. Because your life motif, in many ways, is about... it's about, like we said with the last person with the first house North Node. It's about becoming confident, self-reliant, you see? And not self-reliant in a hyper-independent way, right? That comes from the discomfort from people and from trusting people. This is about, once again, being comfortable with yourself. Finding that sense of self-satisfaction on the inside, where you can let go of this need to people please and to be, like, validated by others. Validation feels great, I'm not gonna lie. I love when my daddy gives me some validation. But I don't need it. I mean, I need it, but I don't need it, I've got my own stuff, And we're able to better approach relationships when we don't need someone else, right? Because that leads to codependency. When we have this sense of a little bit of self-assurance, you know? And I'm fucking insecure. Like, yeah, I've got tons of insecurities. But a modicum of like, of being able to appreciate yourself and your accomplishments and what you do is necessary to be able to approach a relationship in a healthy and um, independent way, maintaining your sense of identity, maintaining your sense of individuality, and not expecting someone else to complete you or make you whole. That's not what it's about. It's about, you know what? You feel like yourself already, and this situation, this relationship is making you grow in new ways, right? My daddy read me this passage from Bell Hooks, where she was talking about a relationship can be a fertile ground for sort of, you know, spiritual development, for developing as a person, right? And it's a very interesting thing because I've experienced that, well, experiencing it, you know. So anyway, it's a very exciting time in your life, sweetheart. It's a very exciting time. And I'm going to move on now, but it's a very exciting time. And I'll just very briefly at the last bit mention Jupiter going into your third house. We know that Jupiter doesn't like Gemini, but Jupiter going through our third house, and you have a third house moon. So, and another full moon, baby, right? Some shit to prove. But when you have your moon in the third house, it often gives you well, first of all, it's a very feminine placement because the moon in the third house was considered the goddess in ancient astrology. So there's something very feminine about it. But there's something also very intelligent about it. Intelligent, communicative, expressive. You may have a facility with writing. The moon rules your fourth house. Maybe your dad was very intelligent. Maybe your mom was very intelligent, right? Or worked in education, perhaps. Something like that. But I bet you did have some sort of neurodivergence or learning disabilities or whatever they want to call it now when you were growing up with the third house Chiron. So anyway, Jupiter going into your third house is going to make you very abundantly communicative, right? I know when Jupiter is going through my third house, it was when I really, really took off with content creation and making fucking videos and doing lives and shit. You know, when Jupiter was going through Aries. So be ready for that. It'll be a fun time. You know, it's definitely a good omen for you. But let's move on to the next person. Thank you, Amber, for reminding everyone. So now it's time for Spicy Autistic. The Spicy Here, let me do this again. Spicy Autistic. Spicy Autistic girlfriend. And thank you for your support. And I saw your lovely post referencing me, Spicy Autistic. I hope you're still here, Spicy Autistic. Are you still here? Is Spicy Autistic still here? Holler if you hear me. Holler if you hear me, sweetheart. Spicy Autistic. I'll start reading for you, my darling. Topless? Who's topless? Oh, there you go. Okay, you are here. So you're a Taurus rising. We had another Taurus rising here a little bit ago. My boyfriend's a Scorpio rising. So 2022 was pretty fucking wild, right? Big breakups, big shakeups. Feeling like, what the fuck is all this? What does it all mean? You know, what am I doing here? You know, life direction stops making sense. And it's interesting for you because you have Saturn in your 10th house, right? In your birth chart. And oftentimes it makes us feel like a late bloomer, you know? We feel like we haven't found our direction until sometimes in our late 30s. Or sometimes we're like, we never feel like we found what we're supposed to do or what we want to do. And so there might be a tendency to drift from one thing to another, right? Sometimes we experience setbacks or big, let me start the clock, sorry. Or big, what do they call it? Falls from grace, or our reputations get tarnished or something in some way. But it's really interesting to me and quite fitting that you're interested in all this stuff because you have a 9th house Sun and Mercury. And this often makes someone quite philosophical. contemplating big questions when they're children. It might be quite annoying to their parents because they're saying things like, how do we exist? Or how do we know God exists? Oftentimes there's a good experience of religion or people who tend to be more spiritually minded with these placements. When in ancient times, when you had the sun conjunct Mercury in the ninth house, you were called a prophet or a prophetess, right? Gifted with prophecy and prophesying. The ninth house was considered the house of God, and the sun was considered God, right? So the sun was said to rejoice in the ninth house. And oftentimes we get very interested in foreign cultures, right? Foreign languages, religions that our parents don't belong to, Oh, and Pisces Venus. I just told a Pisces Venus joke earlier, They tend to be subby. They like to get their makeup fucked up. They like to be called, filthy names, I don't remember LMAO, but yeah, that's what I usually sound like. Oh yeah, I was nuts as a kid, but I thought I was like a supervillain, so I mostly kept private. That's really interesting. I mean, that's very sort of Saturnian too. Saturn rules villains, A lot of people don't like me, Some with good reason and some with not so good reason. But that is sort of a thing. You have Mars opposite Mercury too. Now your Mars isn't happy. He's both retrograde and in Cancer. In Cancer Mars, we joke about it being wimpy, but some big dudes have Cancer Mars, right? Like Jesse Ventura, Cancer Mars. The famous horror actor Bruce Campbell. And also the famous porn star from like the 90s, Peter North, They all have let go. Who's Clara? Topless, let go. You got to give me more context than just let go. I don't know what you mean. I don't know. I'm wearing a sports bra, which is pretty typical after you work out. So I love religion. I only got into astrology to prove it wrong, and then it was right. Well, that's interesting. And, that's good to love religion. I mean, you have a ninth house sun. I have the opposite. I have a ninth house Saturn. So I hate religion, but I study it also. I mean, like, I do love it because it's super interesting. But I also hate it because I hate it as a control mechanism. But see, this is wonderful because you have an opportunity to understand what religion means in essence, right? And I always mention to people that the word religion in English comes from Latin, re legare, to bind together again. You see, it's not just about methods of control, as I was indicating, it's about wholeness. It's about learning to recognize that we are fragmented people in terms of consciousness. I'm this, I'm that, I'm this, I'm that, I'm that, We have all these identifications. But the opportunity we have with religion and spiritual impulse, what the fuck do you keep saying let go for? What does that fucking mean? You can't just say let go and not give me any context. I'm sorry, sweetheart. What are you trying to say? What is this let go? What do you mean let go? Gosh. Gotta give me some context. Don't just say things. Oh yeah, I hate government while loving government. Religion is kind of like government. No, I understand what you're saying. Exactly. Same here. Very similar. But it's a wonderful thing too, you see. Yeah. And Unparalleled Bliss says, it's cool to see people happy in it. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Cassie, hello. Thank you. Yeah, for sure. It has its proper place. I study religion. It's a big part of what I do with astrology. You have to understand religion and where things come from and the symbolism behind stuff in order to appreciate what it really means, right? So I say I hate religion, and yet I'm still primarily focused on studying spirituality too. So we ran out the clock, but I'm going to do a couple more observations. Anyway, Mars opposite Mercury, like I said, it could be very argumentative. It could be a real pain in the ass. Capricorn Mercury takes things very literally, and it thinks it knows the right way to do things. But opposite Mars, it could be very anxious, you see? There's a lot of anxiety. And the thing about Cancer Mars is it internalizes its anger and its emotions, right? Like it'll sit there just like letting stuff build up, right? Like steam in a pot, steam in a kettle. And Mars needs an outlet, and he doesn't get an outlet in Cancer. So what it often does is it lets things build up till it finally explodes. And what you really need to do is learn to let off steam periodically so it doesn't just blow up in people and hurt your relationships. And this eclipse cycle for you is all about the 12th and 6th house axis, which we've just talked about. So having to face painful stuff from the past, having to face things particularly like, mental health issues, addiction issues, depression issues, excuse me, feelings of isolation, right? Having been in institutions or imprisoned or stuff like that. So the big thing, I thought I would like Jehovah's Witness, but he moved it. Yeah, Jehovah's Witness is the worst. I've worked with a few Jehovah's Witness people, and it tends to be a bit batty. And there tends to be a lot of abuse in Jehovah's Witness circles, in my experience. I've had clients who are Jehovah's Witness who've been through a lot of abuse. So, yeah. So Michelle says she's a Cancer Mars and cries when she's angry. That's a very, very common, frequent thing. Very common, frequent thing. Yeah, it explodes. Anyway. So anything else I want to mention? Jupiter going to Gemini here. Going to your second house. So hopefully that helps your finances a teeny bit. Once again, Jupiter doesn't like Gemini. But Jupiter rules what? Your 11th house and your 8th house. So hopefully this does help your financial situation. Maybe you get help from friends or fans or well-wishers because Jupiter rules your 11th house. Or your 8th house is death and other people's money. So it may come from one of those sources, or some sort of help may come from one of those sources. And your life motif with an 8th house North Node is learning to let go, right? Maybe that's what that person was talking about. Learning to let go. And to deal with loss, right? I mean, I don't want to sound negative about it, but oftentimes learning about loss in order to let go. And letting go is what frees us up to be more of ourselves, ultimately. Because holding on to things is like identification, you see. I'm this, I'm that, I'm this, I'm that, I'm this, right? Well, what are you? What are you really? It's not something you can think about or say. It's something you have to observe for yourself, internally within yourself. Like, where does the sense of I come from, you see? So anyway, that's all relevant because that had to do with, the eclipse stuff. You were hoping that you would secure some job source for income. Well, so hopefully that indicates that. Jupiter going into your second house has to do with your income. And you could get job referrals from friends. So, anyway, let's go on to the next person. Yes, unparalleled. What? Who is this? What? Who is this Clara person? Stand up, no pants? I'm wearing shorts, sweetheart. I'm wearing shorts. Who are you? Yeah. It's distracting. It's probably just a bad faith person. Okay, so now where? Now who's next? Now who's next? Who's next here? We had Fancy Life. Fancy Life. Fancy, fancy, fancy. Fancy Life. Fancy Life. Fancy Life. 1453, Santiago, Chile. Chile. Amber, since you're here, you can moderate, please. You can moderate, please, since you're here, Amber. Thank you. Okay, good. That worked. So, fancy life. Fancy life. Well, I didn't know what else to call you, so, you know. So anyway, fancy life. You're at Aries rising also. We've had a couple Aries risings. So this is a very exciting eclipse for you. And once again, this whole year, right, is about big shakeups and breakups. And we're talking about identity. And oftentimes these changes in ourselves can disrupt relationships later. Or they can allow us to get into different, to better relationships. Because oftentimes we repeat the same patterns until we see ourselves quite clearly. And that's a big theme with this. Because maybe you had a big breakup or something that happened at the end. Oh, my cats are asleep and they're dreaming. They're like moving their little paws. They're moving the little paws. Oh, I got to start the clock. They're moving their little paws and like twitching and stuff. They're so cute when I'm not yelling at them. But a big theme here, as I was saying, is you may have had a big relationship experience or breakup or something that happened last October or following last October, coming up till now. And the thing about these, right, we repeat these same patterns until we have a traumatic event or something that forces us to look at ourselves. And that's when we have the identity shakeup. Because we have to see ourselves quite clearly, which is like the one practice that I sort of, I still preach and extol, as much as I am critical of spirituality and religion in many ways. That to me is like the most fundamental thing, learning to see ourselves quite clearly, right? In order to free ourselves from the personal self, because it's a fucking burden. And that's where suffering and pain comes from, So take this, even though it could be a traumatic thing in some ways, you could have some difficult circumstances that stimulate all this stuff in you. Ultimately, this is a wonderful time because it forces you into a new sort of space in consciousness to consider yourself in a new way. And then you're going to go in next year into the other phase where it's sort of like having to process all these things and understand what you just went through, So this is exciting. This is exciting for you too. And you have Saturn going through your 12th house right now. So it undoubtedly will be difficult. You see? Because as Saturn tours our 12th house, we really get taken out of the limelight. We get taken out of public life. For me, when Saturn went through my 12th house, that's when I was beginning to go through divorce and separation. And I moved in with friends who lived out in the fucking boonies, like I very literally was I was very literally taken out of public life, and I was very literally isolated. But if you can weather that storm and not let it pull you under, which I think you can, you're a day chart with Saturn, so Saturn's a lot happier for you. But you can use this opportunity, as a big reflective time. You shouldn't be pushing yourself. You should not be forcing yourself to overexert, right? Taking on big new crazy projects or starting big new endeavors. This is letting things end and die and come to a close, This is about letting things die and come to a close. Amber, can you moderate here? Amber. I'm glad you're here though, Amber. I'm glad you're here, Amber. So anyway, this is an exciting time for you with the eclipse stuff. And you have Saturn conjunct, or sorry, Saturn. You have the Sun conjunct Uranus too, like one of the other people, and I have the opposite, you know. So once again, you're not someone who can be told what to do. You're going to lash out at anyone who tries to have authority over you or lord over you. But once again, I bet you're very spiritually minded or were attracted to arcane subjects and religion as a kid, you know? Sorry, excuse me, 1 second. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Moon opposite Neptune. Need to be careful with that, my darling. Need to be careful with that one. Because it oftentimes does indicate addiction. It can also be very prophetic dreams, even nightmares, like getting a profound sense of deja vu on a frequent basis. Like feeling you've already done this before, you know? Having this sort of mystical sense. But it can be scary. Like I hear about people who have very unpleasant psychic experiences too. You know, feeling like, again, nightmares or feeling like bad entities and stuff around you. So having a practice to like keep your feet on the ground or to make yourself feel secure. Like I'm more interested in Buddhism, so I do the Vajrasattva 100-syllable mantra. That's sort of like my thing when I feel overwhelmed or like unpleasant entities or forces are swirling around me, you see. But I often think about this as just like be careful with substances and things like that. Jupiter rules your 12th house, though, is in the 10th house, and we often see that with therapist type people. You know, people have to handle other people's pain and suffering. You know, that is a thing. That is a thing. Jupiter's going into your 3rd house. We talked about that earlier with someone else. You know, and this is like letting the words flow. You know, if you're a rapper, it's getting into flow. You know, lose it, the music, spaghetti, spaghetti. She's got vomit on her sweater already. Vomit on mom's spaghetti. Vomited on mom's sweater already. You know, whatever. I don't rap. I don't know how to do it, but it's fun. You know, it sounds fun. But communicating in general. You know, people who do sort of content creation, that's a big thing. If you do writing or speaking projects for work, you know, you're more on top of your game. So, very cool thing. I'm one of those people experienced the bad entities, and I've been there a lot before, not again. All I have to do, a lot of different things. My best to stay grounded. Yeah, you know, and I've told friends and previous lovers and stuff who have these experiences. I said you have to keep your feet on the ground and maintain some sort of connection to like physical reality and like total mundane reality. You know, like you have to be able to take care of your daily life first above anything. You got to pay your bills, take care of your kids, feed yourself, you know, all this kind of shit. So that's what's most important. You know, and your life is learning about loss too, especially when you were younger. You know, you may have had a significant death that really affected you before the age of 30. You know, and felt like you really never had your own stuff and things were always being taken away, a sense of loss. And now as you get older here, we're at that age where you start being more concerned with producing your own, you know, building your own empire, having your own stuff, getting recognition. So anyway, let's move on to the, my cadence is off. My cadence is off. You gotta be, can you text me that, Amber? What does that mean, my cadence is off? When you were 9 and 10, I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry. Now we have Valentina. 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 3 p.m. Me. Excuse me. Your flow is what I meant, but you're fine. Why do you always have to do fucking crying faces, Amber? Like, I don't know what the fuck you mean with the crying face. You know, like, your cadence is off, crying face. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means. Miami. Miami-Dade. Yes. Miami-Dade. Soldier. That's a good word, soldier. You know, my dad was a colonel. And I always use military analogies. Yeah. Because you're always crying, Jesus Christ. Oh my gosh, we have a new moon baby here, or pretty close to a new moon. Oh, Valentina. And it's an 8th house new moon in Capricorn. It's a bit dour, isn't it? It's a bit difficult. You have no flow, but the spaghetti joke was funny. What the fuck do you mean? Now I have no flow because you're interrupting my shit. Now I lost my flow. Thank you, Amber. Thank you, Amber. I lost my flow. I appreciate it. Yeah. That's what makes me lose my flow. Now let me start the fucking timer. So anyway, oh, an unhappy Saturn. You're going to have your Saturn return soon, starting in 2026, you know. It's going to be an interesting time. When I see Saturn, you're killing me, Amber. You're killing me. You're killing me, Amber. Anyway, when I see Saturn in the 11th house, I think of the kid who was bullied or ostracized, made to feel left out or weird, like the last kid picked for dodgeball or foursquare, wherever the fuck you played in elementary school. But there's a feeling of being left out by your peers, you know? And the interesting thing about this is as we get older, especially following our Saturn returns, that we have a close circle of friends, you know, that we don't trust a lot of people. But the ones that we do trust, we keep very close to us. And you might be suspicious of group settings. You might be suspicious of organizations, right? Because maybe your individuality was challenged. There's often a sense of needing to maintain one's individuality and a mistrust of situations where that feels like it's having to be sublimated in some way. You see? And when I see Venus conjunct Uranus, the first thing I typically think of is someone who's either kinky or queer in some way. We see homosexuality, bisexuality, gender dysphoria, right? Being genderqueer, being interested in polyamory or different relationship styles. Excuse me. And your Venus is in Aquarius, right? I love Aquarius Venus. I've been with like 4, 5 Aqua Venuses. When they have Venus conjunct my ascendant, they tend to love me or be very attracted to me. My Venus is trying my daddy's ascendant, and you know, that was very instant attraction. And Venus is trying your ascendant, right? Which usually gives someone a very beautiful disposition or makes someone quite attractive, you know? And Venus is in the 9th house. So once again, probably a mystical type person. But when I see a new moon, or almost a new moon in the 8th house, you know, you could almost say it's like the very end of a gibbous, but also, the very end of a balsamic. I guess we could call it a balsamic moon too. You know, a balsamic moon, it feels old. These feel like old people. very reflective, sometimes depressive, right? It's like death. It's known as the dark moon. That's what balsamic means. It's not just dressing. It means dark. In fact, that's why it's called balsamic dressing. It's because it's dark, you know? But there's a sense of tragedy with the 8th house new moon too, you see, or balsamic moon. It could be melancholy. It can be somber. It can be a little depressed. And with Capricorn moon too, there's a sense of melancholy and a sense of not being able to let people in to share your emotions. You probably really want to connect with people, but it's absolutely terrifying to be vulnerable with them. You know, it's terrifying to be vulnerable sometimes with people. It can be very difficult. And yet with moon conjunct Mercury, there's a natural flow or desire to want to speak about the way you feel. And that could be quite frustrating. And then on top of that, you got Mars overcoming your sun. And it's a very unhappy Mars, right? Mars rules your 11th house and but you have a 5th house Mars like I do too. It makes us very sexual. Like I'm a fucking slut. Yeah. Bong. You know what I mean? Like, we need it. We need it. It's just the way it is. And Mars rules your 12th house. So, a couple of difficult things there. But 11th house ruler in your 5th house. Sometimes we do see people who do, like, you know, cam work or exhibitionism, things like that, you know. Read me to filth. Oh, so the timer just went off, but we'll mention a couple more things. Anyway, Mars overcoming your sun and well, mostly your sun. Mom may have had a bad temper. She may have been a difficult person. The other side of that too is that you can have a bit of a temper or be a bit reactive. And maybe you have to apologize later because you scream at people first, you know? And Mars in Libra can be terribly passive aggressive. Like, speaking of rappers, Eminem has Mars in Libra, you know, and I think he's been known for jumping off stage and shit, but he normally fights with his words, doesn't he? You know, I think of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, right? She does the same thing. She gets in like these Twitter battles and shit. She primarily fights with her words, you know, and we see people who like are good with the zingers and the quips. Like, oh yeah? Well, your mommy wears the army boots or something. I mean, that's not a good one, but you know what I'm saying. So, and the eclipses are going between your 11th and 5th house, or 11th and 5th houses, yes. So you see, this is sort of like emerging from your cocoon, especially after 2022. 2022 might have felt like a very like non-eventful year, or like you just had to deal with lots of internal stuff. Or we have injuries and illnesses that pop up, right? But all these things force us to face ourselves after all these big changes that we went through in the previous cycle, you know? And you're having Saturn go through your 10th house. So this is a time when you feel like opportunities are scarce, or like life is not giving you any success or opportunities. Like we go for a job and we don't get it. Like we were expecting a certain opportunity and it doesn't happen. But what it does is it redirects us in a new way. Redirects us in a new direction. Goofy shit. But you see what I'm saying? It puts us on a different track. Oftentimes a better one than we were on previously. You know? So you have to have a little bit of faith in this and a little bit of optimism because you have Jupiter in the 10th house. And so as you get into 2025, the stuff that's depressing now could start to be shifting you or reorienting you into a better direction for later. Right? Then you have your Saturn return. And then the real fun starts. Yes. You're still so young, sweetheart. You're still so young. So, you know. Don't worry. Now, who is We did Fancy Life. We did Valentina. Now it's time for Leia. Leia, you still here? Leia. My homegirl. My homegirl, Leia. She's a client also. She's a client also. It's not funny to say IDK, what the fuck? It's not funny, I'm sorry. I don't care. I don't know what the fuck to say sometimes. Whatever. Oh, I hate physical pain. I know. Yeah, physical pain sucks. I totally feel you. Did Unparalleled put their information in? Amber, did you get the other information? Oh yeah, we have Unparalleled Bliss after that. Okay. So after Leah, we have Unparalleled Bliss, and then we have Christina with a K from Minnesota. So Leah from Omaha. Omaha. Nebraska. 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 Let's throw this up. It's all about throwing up. Spaghetti, spaghetti, spaghetti. You got vomit on your mom's sweater already. I don't know. That's just funny to me. I'm just making myself laugh. Well, Leah, we've talked about your chart a lot in the past, I know. And you're a Libra moon like me. And you're a full moon baby. With some shit to prove. And Mercury conjunct your sun. In Aries. And in the 5th house. You know, so we already know this, but lively debates. You're never wrong, are you? That doesn't happen. How could you be wrong when you have Mercury conjunct the sun in Aries? And I always joke about Mercury and Aries because they just accidentally break shit all the time. You know? It's just like, they're very impulsive. And they just go off on some bullshit, you know? And they get really worked up about that bullshit sometimes. But Mercury and Aries, you know, it can be very intelligent. Very intelligent, just sometimes thinks without thinking, if you will. Like, I had a Mercury and Aries girlfriend who, like, we were driving, and she takes the visor, and she's gonna put it back in, and she goes, smash! And she broke the fucking thing that holds the window visor. And I'm like, yo, what are you, little Hulk? Like, Jesus. Why are you smashing my shit, yo? But anyway, I mean, these are very sexual placements. And we both know, because we're both Libra moons, that we really, really are, especially when we're younger, we want to be liked. We like to make other people feel good. We're socially graceful. You know, we can almost be a little too deferential or diplomatic. I always joke that Libra moons tend to be friends with people who hate each other. And then they get caught in the middle like fucking Stretch Armstrong. You know? So, feels like my thoughts run 1,000,000 miles an hour at times. Yeah, for sure, sweetheart, for sure. You know, and Sun conjunct Mercury is also very intelligent too. I mean, the Sun, Mercury is never more than 28 degrees away from the Sun. But still, when we see the conjunction like that, it's very intelligent type people. They could just be very impulsive as well. And you likely, with Moon opposite Mercury, have a lot of anxiety. But this eclipse phase for you is very important because it was conjunct your Sun. And this is like that phase I was talking about earlier where it's like, hey, we're emerging into the light of day. Now, sometimes, you said it's hard to filter, but Libra moon sometimes succeeds. Yeah, I mean, Libra moon at least has some social tact, you know? Libra moon has some tact. We tend to have that. I mean, otherwise, I would be a really abrasive bitch, you know? So at least we have that tact. I mean, Venus conjunct Saturn, very awkward. Hell yeah, you're the awkwardest, you know? So on the one hand, very sexual, probably pretty popular with people with the 11th house moon. But then you got Saturn conjunct Venus. And usually when Saturn's in the fourth house, it's not very nice father, you know, not a very nice dad. Or a dad that was never around. Excuse me. But you're having your Saturn return. So you are processing a lot of this stuff, you know. This is a fruitful time for you. Even though it's not very nice and not very comfortable. And Saturn's going to cross your natal Saturn very soon. You know? Huh. I mean, this is a big release in many ways, sweetheart. It's a big release. And it's emerging into a whole new condition and an experience of yourself. Mars conjunct Saturn right now on top of your Venus Saturn. Yeah, I mean, that conjunction, it perfects on the 10th. I was going to talk about that. But yeah, it's right on top of your Saturn and Venus. Exactly. And, you know, the thing about Mars conjunct Saturn is it tends to coincide with a couple of things. Violent falls from grace for people typically. But we also see things like, you know, I mean, Elon Musk basically took over Twitter when this happened last time. So the last time was April 4th, 2022. It's also when the Ukrainian government accused Russia of really disgusting war crimes like rape and, you know, like mass rape and mass execution of civilians and stuff like that. You know, after the Russian forces withdrew from Kyiv. Volodymyr Zelensky, he requested that the UN intervene and investigate all these things, you know. And this was all like on the day Mars was conjunct Saturn, right? Mars also rules illnesses. So we saw like COVID shutdowns, right? In Shanghai, China. When this happened in 2022, they extended their shutdown, their lockdown. You know? Oh, and then New Mexico had its biggest wildfire ever. You know? Fucking wild. 341,000 acres burned. 62 million trees. You know? Oh, this is funny too. When Mars was conjunct Saturn last time, Will Smith was banned from attending the Oscars by the fucking Academy, yo. Because he slapped Chris Rock. I mean, I don't know. I've heard conflicting things about how that went down or whatever. Like, some people said Will Smith was in the right. Some people said he wasn't. I don't know. I don't know enough about all that shit. But, you know, I'm open to hearing about it. So, Leah, anyway, some really important stuff going on, especially with this eclipse season. And I think it's really a potent and fruitful and optimistic time for you. I mean, I joke with the Sag risings like, hey, watch out for getting pregnant. And that is sort of a thing when you have an eclipse in your 5th house. But, you know, I'm not going to put that evil on you. I mean, we all love our children, don't we? But, I mean, enough is enough. You know, like, I got one. That's plenty. I got one. Oh, and it's an I-E, not a Y, Leah. It's Frankie. And you could just call me Saturn Girl. That's much better. Is something bad going to happen with the Mars-Venus-Saturn conjunction? Is something bad going to happen? I'm not going to go there and say that kind of shit. This is your Saturn return, sweetheart. You're letting go of your past. The 4th house is your origins, your father, where you came from. You see? This is about closing a door on traumatic shit from your childhood. That's what this is. So I imagine, I don't remember your whole situation, but I imagine you carry a bunch of shit around with you. And this is when you're supposed to be relinquishing it, learning to let go of that stuff. When Saturn crosses over your Venus, it totally stifles it too. You know, you're going to feel like you can't get out. Like you can't do things, you can't connect with people, you can't socialize. You will definitely feel awkward. Mars conjoining your Saturn, though, is actually a little bit better. You know, it lights a fire up under your ass. It makes you start doing things. So no, I don't necessarily see this as a bad thing for you, but I do see it as part of a wider, difficult period or cycle that started in March of last year. when Saturn went into your 4th house and will continue until early 2026. And then Saturn will go into your 5th house. So I can't remember if you're a parent or not. But anyway, I gotta move on. I gotta move on. Yeah, Leah, don't be overly apprehensive or freaked out. Mars going over Saturn will ignite you a little bit. It'll make you start doing shit. It'll make you more active. But Saturn going over your Venus is going to make you less approachable, less social, maybe a little depressed, you know? So anyway, no, you do not have kids. Well, I don't know if you want them or if you're in a situation to have or want them, but sometimes that's a thing. But I think in your case, it more has to do with sex and romance. I'm hoping for that. So anyway, let's go on to unparalleled bliss. Let's go on to unparalleled bliss. We'll just call them unparalleled. The unparallelogram. Oh, Lacey. I'll call you Lacey. I'll just call you Lacey. Lacey. Racy Lacey. She's so racy. Another Libra. Another Libra. Another Libra. Oops. Another Libra. Excuse me. Excuse me. Newcastle. Indy. So Lacey, my dear Lacey, you've got Saturn conjunct your ascendant and the moon in the 7th house. When I see this combination and the moon opposite the sun, a couple big things come immediately to mind. Number 1, people pleasing. Number 2, looking for validation or value through other people. Being sometimes kind of a simp. Getting caught up in relationships that are not good for you. You're probably interested, or you probably have been interested in the past, in either mentally ill people, addicted people, addicts, fixer-upper types, people that you want to save. Like, oh, I can save them. No, you can't save anyone. You're not Jesus. Jesus saves, right? I'm joking, I saw Jesus in the toast the other day. I grew up Catholic. I'm not making fun of my Christian friends. I'm just making fun of religiosity, But we do see people here who look for their value through others. And with the moon in the 7th house, that sort of thing gets reaffirmed. People pleasing, codependency. You see? And your Venus isn't happy in Scorpio. And in the 12th house, right? And your 7th house ruler in the 12th house, which is why I mentioned addicts and people who may have not been the best for you, It's a difficult situation. But you see, where's your North Node? In the 5th house. That's like mine. My North Node's in the 5th house too. And this eclipse is in the 5th and 11th house axis, you see. And the thing about a North Node in the 5th house, I scream the apocalyptic song, I'm not Jesus all the time, so I feel you. Yeah, I mean, I'm joking, like I'm having fun. Oh, the other thing before I move on to Mars in the North Node is Saturn opposite the moon. Typically, what I call that is also mama trauma, right? We have difficult experiences with our mothers, right? And that entails also sometimes abusive mothers, overly strict, domineering. Why is camera out of focus? There we go. Domineering mothers, right? Sometimes they are mentally ill. Plus your 10th house ruler's in the 12th house. Maybe you are someone who deals with mental illness or deals with addicts in some way. Maybe you're a social worker. I don't know. I don't know. But we do see that kind of thing with that sort of stuff. Yes, extremely fucked up childhood. I know everyone has a story to tell. You know, everyone has a story to tell, but it is so true for me. Addictions just really mess stuff up. Well, yeah, and you feel like you're reading a fifth house north node for people all the time. I know. Well, I have a fifth house north node too, Daddy. So, but yes, addiction's a thing. With you have this whole 12th house complex here. I'll call it a stellium, even though it's kind of wide, but still, you know, we'll call it a stellium just for fun. You know, it's a wide orb, but we could say Pluto's conjunct Venus too. Pluto conjunct Mercury is very intelligent and probing, but it's very argumentative too, and it doesn't let up. It gets obsessed with ideas. Pluto conjunct Venus, we've talked about already quite a bit. Very obsessive with relationships, treats people like prey oftentimes, but also very socially awkward. You know, very difficult in relationships. And Venus in Scorpio itself is already difficult in relationships, you know, because it gets selfish. It gets selfish, possessive. It wants to control because it's insecure. It's insecure with itself. You see? So you have these multiple markers of a lack of confidence on the one hand. Sometimes we see body dysmorphia with this sort of thing. Frequently we see body dysmorphia. You could be extremely attractive and you just feel like you're gross, you know? I mean, I have Saturn conjunct the moon and I had terrible body dysmorphia and gender dysphoria, obviously, you know? So this is a very common thing. Depression with moon opposite Saturn. You know, trauma from mama. Sometimes we see other mental illnesses too, you know, personality disorders or whatever. Bipolar disorder, all sorts of things. Yes, mama complex trauma for real. I cry though. I cry through it, you know. It's good to cry. I cry all the time. I cry all the time. And you see, you probably were sort of an idealistic and very principled child, maybe. Like you had, you know, big ideals, like you wanted to do the right thing all the time. But as we get older now, and you're very close to my age, you're 4 years younger than me, but you're approaching that time of your second nodal return. You see? You're very close to it here because the nodes are in Aries. So it's basically your nodal return right now. We start to grow down as we grow up. You know, like I was always in like political groups and religious groups growing up. You know, I'm a Mason. I was in a tarot group. I was in spiritual groups. You know, I was a political activist. You know, all this sort of shit before my second nodal return. And then when the fifth house kicked in, then I'm like, hey, I'm going to do cam girl work. Hey, I'm going to start my own business. Hey, you know, I want to have fun. I want to have lots of sex. I want to go to orgies. I want to, you know, do all these fun things I never did when I was younger. You know, and it's like life begins for us then. And we start to enjoy ourselves and have fun. You know, I hope you already have children. Because the eclipse here, you know, I see Jupiter in your fifth house, but retrograde. So sometimes children could come later in life. Jupiter also rules your fifth house or your first house, you know. And the eclipse, you know, in your fifth house. So just be aware. You have to stop yourself from self-mutilation in many ways. God bless, sweetheart. Self-bullying without auditory hearing. Yeah. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. Christina says, I'm learning so much from listening to you read these charts. Well, I'm glad. I hope so, yeah. I mean, anyone can be learning from these, and you might have the same placement someone else does. So, bullying, self-bullying. I mean, yeah. Saturn in the first house. Once again, beating yourself up. More so than anyone else ever could. You know. But this eclipse cycle is so great for you because it represents coming out of your cocoon and emerging into the light of day a little bit. So I hope this is, this should be an optimistic time for you. And from here on out, your life is about learning to have fun again, to enjoy yourself again. I know that's what my life has become about. I mean, I have a business and I have to make money. I'm working and I have a child, of course. But learning to enjoy myself, because I never let myself enjoy myself. Everything was always like obligation or depressing or any that sort of thing. Yeah, that cam girl work is what I've been dipping my toes into. Yes, I have one child with his dad. Well, and maybe you find out you're a little bit of an exhibitionist too. I know I did. I love people looking at me, and I love people. That's why I was pissed at the other person, because it's like, yo, you could watch me do that shit somewhere else. So. Let me go back to this. Oh, I gotta do Christina in just a second. I gotta do Christina. But really quickly, I do want to say about Jupiter going into your 7th house. If you've been feeling lonely or strained in your relationships, this could be a good omen for meeting a new long-term person. I know that my daddy has had Jupiter in the 7th house, and they met me, towards the end of it, but still, hey. So. But yeah, that's frequently a thing. And hopefully you've gotten to a period in your life. I hope you've recognized a lot of these patterns in yourself, because it's not a death sentence. It's by recognizing them that you can start to work on them, because it's through self-observation, through shining the light of our own attention on our own unconsciousness that reveals these things to us. And by seeing them, we begin to slowly disentangle our sense of identity with them. We learn to not identify so much. We get some space or detach a little bit from the behavior and the patterns that we see, because the chart, your natal chart, is really just a map of your unconscious patterns. That's mostly what it is. And by learning to observe ourselves, we see these patterns clearly and we free ourselves from them. One of my gurus, the Sri Maharaj Nisargadatta, he said, the reward of self-knowledge is freedom from the personal self. That's what all this shit is about. I love sex and money more than anyone, but astrology is ultimately about self-development. See? My daddy said, yes, Jupiter was good to me, yes. Well, Jupiter's my other daddy, like I do planetary devotion, even though I say I don't believe in things. And Jupiter does that sort of stuff too. Anyway. We gotta move on, Lacey. We gotta get on to Christina. But I hope that's useful stuff. I really think the Jupiter thing's gonna be great for you. Meanwhile, Saturn's going through your 4th house, and that is rough. That is rough, I know. Excuse me. When was Saturn in Taurus? I'm going to look that shit up really quick. When was Saturn in Taurus? 2000. Oh my gosh. Saturn was in Taurus 2001. My 4th house. Huh. That's really interesting. I'm just reflecting back on, the things that happened when Saturn went through my 4th house. And, that's when I graduated high school. And, I went to college. I sort of left home in a lot of ways. Quite interesting. Oh, and Amber. Yeah, that Amber was born in 1999 when Saturn was in Taurus. 1999. I guess it was still like that when I was in high school. I was having issues with my father, right? Having issues with my father. 9/11 happened, and then the Iraq War started, and he was in the military, and he was supposed to go, but he died. So, I'm not saying your dad's gonna die or any shit like that. But we do have a sense of being removed from home. You know? We have a sense of having to confront our past. We have a sense of having to become independent of our families in a lot of ways. Especially if we've become reliant, or not even reliant, but having expectations of our families. We cut that shit off. You know? There was a sense of strain that came from my relationship with my father at the time. You know, because my stepmom was like really, interfering in things. I don't want to get too much into that, but, Stanislava says, my country had a very bad economical inflation after socialism fell 2 years prior. Yes. Yeah. I don't know what country you're in, but yeah, most of the former Soviet bloc fell into disarray after the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Yugoslavia, if you're from Yugoslavia, after socialism fell in Yugoslavia, that was terrible. And I'm sure you remember the bombing of Yugoslavia in the early 90s under Bill Clinton. And that whole thing was just awful. And the destruction of Yugoslavia then really dealt a blow to that whole region. I mean, the fall of the Berlin Wall, too. I don't want to get into politics, but yeah. Oh, you're Bulgarian. Yeah. You were in the Warsaw Pact. That's correct. Warsaw Pact. I had a friend growing up who was Bulgarian. I've had lots of friends from the Balkans. I've had friends. One of my dear friends was from Croatia. He's Croat, right? Anyway, I met someone from Macedonia the other day. Macedonia, all the Balkans. You got all the Balkans with you. But we got to get to Christina. We got to get to Christina. But yeah, I mean, the late 80s and early 90s was basically the destruction, the unmitigated destruction of the Warsaw Pact and the former Soviet bloc, which was completely fucking stupid. And we could talk about why that was many times, But it created the big rift between the United States and Russia. Rather than do what the United States did after World War II with, the Marshall Plan. Was it the Marshall Plan? Yeah, the Marshall Plan. Where they basically economically rebuilt Western Europe in order to, counteract the Soviet Union. But then after the fall of the Soviet Union, all they did was isolate, the newly formed Russian Federation, or whatever it was known as. Boris fucking Yeltsin. Jesus Christ. Boris fucking Yeltsin. I tell you, that was a sick man. And then Putin took over after Yeltsin, you see. So, anyway, we don't need to get into all that. And I might be wrong about a few things. We need to talk about Christina. What's up with Christina? Christina. I'm a fucking history nerd. Like, I'm a big history nerd. My dad made me into one. When I was a kid, I had to learn the 5 pillars of Islam by the time I was 10. That's my daughter's age. My daughter doesn't even know what Islam is. I mean, she does, because she's my daughter, but I want her to know about all these things. And Christina was born in 1989, right? Around the time of the fall of the Berlin Wall. And that's also, it was the end of the Reagan era, and then George H.W. Bush came in. I remember that election. I was in kindergarten, but I remember it, vividly. I remember kindergarten vividly, and I remember that election vividly. Minnesota. So here is Christina. Another fucking Aries rising. Oh my God, yo. Christina, I hope I have your information correct. I have April the 12th, 1989, 5:53 a.m., Robbinsdale, Minnesota. It looks like you're in Aries rising again, with in the eclipse was conjunct your natal sun and Venus. Right? Aries Venus. I when I think of Aries Venus, I think of like cis women using the urinal, or whatever. I think of like, Marilyn Monroe had an Aries Venus. You know that famous picture of her like blowing her skirt up? Like that's Aries Venus. Aries Venus. It's like She-Hulk. It's like, let me grab you and shove my tongue in your face. But I'm sure you're very charming and attractive with Venus conjunct your sun. You know. But anyway, the eclipse in your first house, we've talked a lot about what this is, the big shakeups and breakups, right? So following October, once again, you could have had a big breakup that propelled you into a whole new, eat, pray, love kind of thing. Who am I? Let me discover religion. Let me discover something. I don't know. I'm not saying necessarily, but it's just what comes to mind. Like eat, pray, love. He dumped me, so I'm going to go to India or some shit. Just kind of a joke. Just kind of a joke. But this is a very exciting time. It's a very exciting time when you get forced to look at yourself in a new way. And that could open you up for a new way of relating to people later. And a new sort of relationship, perhaps. Another Mars in Gemini like me can't stop fucking arguing. We don't even know when we're arguing. We might be arguing and not even be aware of it. And people will tell me all the time, like, Saturn girl, I'm not arguing with you. And I'll just keep on going, like, why they're wrong. You should be arguing with me. That's the obsessive arguing. It's like the investigative reporter, or like, remember A Few Good Men? Did anyone see A Few Good Men with Tom Cruise? Remember, he plays the lawyer in the Navy who's like examining Jack Nicholson, who's the colonel he's the Marine colonel, Colonel Nathan R. Jessup. Reminds me of my dad, to be quite honest. I'm in the business of saving lives. Like my dad, when I was a kid, he told me, Frankie, life is either kill or be killed. Okay, shit. That's a way to foster paranoia. But in a way, he's correct. In a way, in a manner of speaking. And for a lot of us, that's how we experience Gemini Mars. Everything's a fight, But it's like gentle sparring, It's like, hey, you'd probably be good at boxing or something, or martial arts. Probably should do something like that, to be honest with you. You probably should. Oh, you have Saturn opposite the moon too. You poor baby. So your dad, well, you got Chiron in the fourth house. I was about to say your dad may have been a good person or a pleasant person, but I don't know with Chiron in the fourth house. But Saturn opposite the moon is typically mama trauma, mama drama, right? Mental health issues, oftentimes that come from that. And with your North Node in the 12th house, dealing with mental health issues, learning how to work with them, work through them, manage them. That's the word I was looking for. Manage them, right? I got my own issues, but they're manageable. I'm on medication, right? I'm in therapy. I have chronic illness, but I manage that too with doctors, right? These things are manageable. So as we get older, it's about managing these sorts of things rather than letting them take over you. You have your sun in the first house, so sure you feel very important. Conjunct Venus, very, very important. F your dad, lol. Okay, so your dad wasn't very nice. But I would imagine mom wasn't great either. So I imagine she was either domineering, abusive, or... But Chiron in the fourth house could be the same thing with dad. So, Sucks. And if you're attracted to men, you're attracted to the very confident, very powerful seeming men. You like confident dudes, which also can open us up to narcissists, people who display fake confidence, right? They seem very confident, they seem extremely charming, and then we fall into that fucking trap, which I have several times. So, but anyway, this eclipse season is amazing for you. And then Jupiter's going to be going through your third house. We already talked about that. We talked about, content creation, having a lot to say, writing, speaking, abundant communication. Can also be good luck for siblings. Like you may have a brother, sister, or other sibling that experiences some sort of luck or benefit. When I see Mars in the third house, though, I wonder if you have fights with your siblings. So, what else we got going on here? Venus was going through your 12th house, and she just went into your first. So even though it sucks having Venus in Aries, you know what I mean? She's just not happy there. But the cool thing is this is your time to sparkle and shine. Like, this is fun for you. You should buy some new clothes. Change your hair up, put glitter on. I don't know what you fucking do, but do something that makes you feel pretty. Do something that makes you feel good. Get out there. When Venus crossed my ascendant is when I met my boyfriend, so make yourself pretty. Get those guys, why don't you? Come on, do it. And you're a last quarter moon, the very end of disseminating. So it's a very critical moon phase. These are people who know how to criticize others. It's less active, it's more reflective. It's like the kind of people who say, like, well, that didn't work. And that didn't work because this. Or, that won't work. It's the people who are critiquing things rather than doing them so much. And both have their place. And then your moon is trine Pluto. So it's a very deep, you don't get along with any sisters, but my one brother is my BFF. See, there you go. That's Mars in the third house fighting with siblings, and then Jupiter in the third house having a good sibling. I'm new here, came in late. How did the live readings work? Well, I'm going to go off in just a second, sweetheart. I'm going to be leaving the stream in just a second because I've been on for 2 hours and 10 minutes. So, but I'm going to do another one, hopefully this weekend or next Monday or Tuesday. I do my streams either Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday because those are the days I don't have my daughter. So, but Pluto trine your moon, Christina, can be difficult too for mama trauma. But oftentimes it gives us like a weird closeness with our mothers too. Like we end up talking to them about our sex lives and drugs and shit like that, like taboo subjects. So I don't know if that ever came up between you and your mother, but that is sort of another thing that happens. That is sort of a thing that happens, but you're probably also quite obsessive in relationships. Like with Pluto moon people, I have Pluto conjunct the moon. We're not content just to date someone. We want to consume them or be consumed by them or both. We want to grow deep roots into each other. We kind of need other Plutonian people. Like, thank God I'm fucking non-monogamous because I do need that, but then I need a bunch of other people who have like, hi, let's get it done and bye. You know what I mean? So, once again, I'm so, but yeah, that's some difficulty. There. But it also makes us very deep people. We feel everything a lot deeper than everyone, Like we feel emotions, like for me, with Pluto conjunct the moon, when I was a fucking kid, every crush I had in high school was like, a life a life-threatening event, let's just say. Like, I would go into like breakdowns and shit over these sorts of things. You know, because we have an intensity of feeling. We have an intensity of relating. So you need to find someone who's got similar intensity to you, but who isn't a fucking narcissist. Because a lot of them like feign or fake that sort of thing. They might be sort of intense, but they fake the confidence, they fake the love, you know. And you can tell because they love bomb the shit out of you. They make you feel like the best person alive, and then they take it away. You know, and when you try to ask them about that, they say, "Oh no, you're just being crazy. No, everything's fine. Stop being so weird. Just be more confident," you know? So you gotta watch out for shit like that. But it doesn't have to be that way. We see our patterns and we can learn to let them go after seeing them. And you do have a lot of confidence, probably. Like, you do. But there's also that other self-loathing shit. Body dysmorphia, maybe. Feeling gross. Feeling like you're not beautiful. So, anyway, my voice is starting to hurt and I've gone over 15 minutes. So I'm going to cut it off here. Thank you, Amber, for helping moderate. I hope work went well. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Shaima, for tipping me. Thank you, Ms. Colston, for being a member. I love you. I will be doing chart readings again next week, probably. Hopefully I go sooner, but I will post and let you know. You have not seen Anger Management where Jack Nicholson with his hair sing, "I feel pretty, I feel pretty, I feel witty and something and gay." Yeah, that was funny. That was from Sondheim. I think it was from Sondheim. Stephen Sondheim. Anyway. Oh, Daddy, you've been here so long. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. I love you so much. And now I have to go. And I will text you in a second, Daddy. And I love you all and thank you all for coming. And I hope you enjoyed that, Christina. Yeah. Thank you so much. And please, for those of you who knew me as Frankie, that's like my legal name, but I much prefer Saturn Girl or Baby Girl or Princess or Slut. But I love you all very much and have a wonderful rest of your evening. Mwah.